So I want to take a look today at the Generation 5 LT1, LT4 oil pump. The reason we're doing this is that I'm building an LT1, but I'm building extremely high performance, higher than I've seen done yet on the internet. And the valve train that comes with the LT1 is definitely a problem. So we're running an LS style valve train, 3-bolt cam, 3-bolt cam gear, obviously off of a LS C5R timing chain. And the problem I'm running into is that you can't use the LS style timing chain dampener with this oil pump. And we're gonna get into how this pump works and why that's a problem for me. So this is your standard GM 6.2 liter LT1 and LT4 wet sump pump. It's the pump you find on all the Camaros, I believe the new CTS-V. I don't know if the trucks are the same, and I don't know if the 5.3 is the same, so this may or may not apply. The way this pump is laid out is very similar to an LS style pump. We have an inlet on the bottom, comes through at the bottom of the pump, rotates up, goes inside the pump, over here, out the back of the pump right here, into the main oil galley in the block. One of the many ways this pump is different is the internals. This is what's called a variable vane pump. And what happens is that these vanes can shift as this gear moves from side to side. So it can be centered. This is your low pressure operation, or it can be offset. This is your high pressure operation. In resting position with the engine off, this is how the pump is sitting. What happens as you start the car and this pump spins, these lower sections are under a vacuum. They suck oil from the pan up into the pump. And then as it comes over here, it gets pressurized, continuing up here, out the back of the pump. The reason this happens is because of the different volume of each of these sections as the pump spins. What makes this difficult for me is that this oil pump uses oil pressure to switch between high and low pressure modes. Right here on the back of the pump, there's an oil pressure reference port. It connects directly to the #1 main bearing. That oil comes in here, pressurizes this cavity, and goes down into the pump right here. Now there's an electronic actuator right here that normally is closed. This is in a closed state at rest position. So what happens is you're in a high pressure mode, you crank the car. As soon as oil pressure builds up, this cavity pressurizes, and this whole outer ring right here pivots on this pin. When it pivots down, you end up like this. Notice all these cavities are about the same size. This is your low pressure. You have high pressure oil right here that pushes it down against the spring. When you accelerate, this actuator opens, and the oil that went down here into the actuator comes out right here. It pressurizes this cavity. These two cavity pressures offset, allowing the spring to overpower, pushing this outer ring back up, giving you high pressure. The question for me is, what happens if you disable all this? If I plug this port, I don't connect this actuator to anything, and I rely solely on the spring, what happens? The result should be that we end up in high pressure all the time. There's no oil coming in here to pressurize this. There's no oil coming over here to offset it. This is completely empty. Therefore, the spring is the only pressure control device that we have. The question also comes up, what if the actuator or the spring fails? Well, this actuator is normally closed. So if you have an electronics failure and it never opens, this port will never get pressure. This port will be pressurized, and you'll be in the low pressure mode, which is the fail-safe. Now, if the spring fails entirely, you'll have pressure here that will force this ring over, and it will actually go to the exact opposite. You'll end up with something like this. That will give you a dangerously low oil pressure. The computer will see this, open the actuator, introduce oil into here, balance these two out, and you should end up in your actual low oil pressure state. So this oil pump has 9 vanes, and we're gonna take it apart real quick. This is what we end up with. This is your intake side. It's connected directly to this port. This is your pressure side. This is the reference that I referred to that comes off the main bearing. This is what's in my way. This is exactly where the timing chain dampener sits. So the question is, can I block this reference off? That all travels over here, and you can see this is the inlet to the actuator. This is the outlet to the actuator. That was that cavity over here. So that's an explanation of how the pump works. For my particular application, we're going to plug this hole actually in the block. So we have no oil pressure here, no oil pressure here, and we're gonna rely on the spring to do everything for us. So hopefully it helps with your swap. I couldn't find anything on this, so I wanted to kind of break it down for people to make it easier to understand. And let me know if you have any questions.